Thank you for joining our webinar today. I am Paul McDonald, Vice President of Business Development for Automated Logistics. Just a few housekeeping items before we get going with the webinar. Number one, we would welcome your questions and we will entertain those at the end of the session. So please utilize the chat function on your screen if you would like to submit questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can. And for those that we don't get to, we will answer after the session. Another area, we will be recording this session and make that available to all that have attended. So please feel free to share this session with others in your company. The focus of today's webinar is on the automotive industry restart, which is right around the corner. Matt Eckler and I are going to address 10 key steps in what we feel are 10 key steps for the automotive restart to be successful. And our priorities are going to be around providing real-time information that you can utilize with your demand forecasting, promoting resiliency that you're going to need during these uncertain times to make necessary adjustments in your supply chain, and to have a long-term plan forward. Once you've addressed your short-term challenges, have a long-term plan forward for sustainability. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Matt Eckler to talk a little bit about our organization.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning, everyone. My name is Matt Eckler. I'm our Vice President of Operations here at ALS. Very excited and grateful to be talking with you here today. So thanks for joining. To build on what Paul said and give you a little bit more of a background about ALS, we're a privately held, family-owned business, and we have deep roots in transportation. We're currently a Transport Topics top 100 provider in the U.S., and we have headquartered operations here in Jackson, Michigan, as well as warehouses throughout the Midwest, and most notably in Laredo, Texas, where we serve our customers' Mexico and cross-border needs. Beyond ALS, our reputation goes back all the way to 1927, when the Parker family's business was known as Parker Motor Freight. It's with that experience, as well as the experiences of our customers and our partners, that we believe we bring a unique perspective on this automotive restart. So it's our goal today that we give you some value, we give you some unique perspective, a different way to think about the challenges that we're going to be facing over the coming months. And hopefully you get that with today's presentation. So with that, I'll hand it back over to Paul and we'll get into it. Thank you.
You know, I've been working in the automotive industry for greater than 30 years, and I've seen many automotive restarts in the past. You know, back in 2008, with the financial crisis and the bankruptcies of a few of the OEMs, labor strife in the past that have caused shutdowns, natural catastrophes and disasters. But this restart is different than all that I've seen in the past. There's lots of uncertainty. So it's important that we are prepared better than ever for this restart. It's more complex. It's a worldwide industry challenge now, not just individual challenges of a few OEMs. This is the reason we're putting this webinar out today, so that we can offer information with our customers and help them with their restart plans. So this is why we're putting this together. We feel it's our purpose as we work heavily in the logistics, in the automotive industry as a logistics provider. So let's jump into the first step of an automotive restart plan, and that is to stay healthy during the startup. I would ask the question, are you confident that you're able to meet the stay healthy requirements of your organization for restart? There are safe start playbooks that have been put out by some major tier 1 automotive suppliers, the likes of Magna and Lear, that have been made available. If you at your company don't have a restart playbook, we'd be glad to share those that have been made available to the industry. Restarts in China and Europe have proven to have successful safety-first restarts. Those facilities have been provided with proper PPE equipment, sanitization procedures, and workflow redesign to ensure social distancing. So there's optimism as we prepare for the restart in the United States. But the bottom line, it's employee health, employee safety. That's the most important. We must keep employees safe, healthy, and feeling comfortable as we work toward this economic recovery and work to keep our automotive assembly plants and all of our supplier networks up and running. PPE is here to stay. The next step in a successful automotive restart is to ensure that you have accurate and real-time information. Are you getting the real-time market intelligence that integrates into your demand forecasting today? That's one of the reasons that we're putting on this webinar today. At ALS, we are constantly updating information, and we are publishing this on our website through LinkedIn updates. We're using press releases, automotive news updates, automotive cluster information from Mexico, government announcements, direct contact with our customers. We're gathering all of this information and we're sharing this every day as information is updated. For example, we walked in this morning and there were 3 announcements for FCA, GM, and Ford that pushed out their projected assembly plant startup dates even further into May. So it's our hope that you can utilize this information so that you can assess realistic final demand with this market intelligence and project any major increases or decreases that may result in your forecast modeling. The third key step is to have a good business continuity plan. I think Magna's CEO, Swami Kodagiri, says it best. In an article that came out in the Detroit News several weeks ago, he quoted that restarting the automotive industry is more complicated than flipping a switch. The different tiers of suppliers that feed into each other create a chain that can collapse due to one weak link. As I mentioned in all the restarts that I've been familiar with, this one weak link, it becomes more imperative that we avoid that weak link from breaking for this restart that we're about to take on. It really starts with, are you able to vet the preparedness of all your suppliers, both today and moving forward? You need to be able to focus on schedule reliability and delivery and be very flexible in this industry restart so that you can adjust and avoid downtime with your plants, negative impacts on your unit price. That all comes with a good continuity plan, and it starts with your communications with your suppliers. If you're struggling with that supplier communication, this may be the time to reach out to a logistics provider to help you address supplier communications that you may need moving forward. And those communications are going to be critical day in and day out, every day that you have started up, so that you can see if they can fulfill your demand and forecasts and respond accordingly. A good example, let's talk about a good example of why this is so important. There's going to be shortages. We can expect that. We see that in all of the communications that we're receiving from our customers, that they are preparing for shortages. Well, think about the area of a supplier that is committed to your release, and at the last minute before conveyance onto a truck is 10 pallets short of a 20 pallet order. And what is your what if plan to address that? Do you change the mode on the fly and move from a truckload to a consolidation to make sure you keep that cost structure down? Is your supply chain nimble enough to make that kind of change? Or do you keep it and move it as a truckload mode and adjust later the next shipment out? But those are examples of what if capabilities that you want to make sure that you're addressing as part of your business continuity plan. The next step in the automotive restart is to prepare to manage your new customer demand. I would ask the question, can you currently change transportation modes on the fly? What are going to be the demand signals or thresholds that drive these changes? When you look at your supply chain prior to the shutdown, supply chains that looked at truckload movements, potential consolidations, does that mix now change, and do you need to consider more options such as LTL, partial FTLs, or will these truckload volumes be enough to sustain the way you move them in the past, or should you consider moving them via consolidation networks that you haven't considered in the past? To be able to make these decisions as we're moving from the forecast to the actual release, firm release that will come up week to week when you start up. Have you looked at your dynamic planning capability? Have you looked at the ability to be more resilient by moving to a dynamic monitoring of your schedule? Those are areas that are going to be able to create the resiliency that you may need to respond in this challenging industry startup. So as you prepare for customer demands, take a look at these areas. You may not be capable right out of the gate, but it's certainly something that you can utilize a logistics provider to help you get to a more dynamic mode if you're capable of doing that. If you're not capable in the short term, then by all means, look at building that into your long-term plan. The fifth key step in an automotive restart plan is to revisit your supply chain design and visibility. Is your network design, are your nodes and flows, are they set up properly to allow you to be as resilient as you need to be during this restart? Everything has changed when we come back out of this COVID-19 situation. And if you hadn't considered a redesign of your supply chain, if it's something that you have done in the past, every other year, if it's something you look at on a quarterly basis, now with the expected volatility that we're going to see, now might be the time to consider a more nimble or a redesign on a more frequent basis. And certainly there are logistics providers out there that can assist you with that if you choose to do that. And it's a lot more in today's market. That capability is a lot better today with the ability to move quickly on information flow upstream and respond to that if you were willing to look at a redesign of the network. And again, as I mentioned in the past, if a redesign is not something you even would consider in the short term, it's certainly something you want to consider in your long-term path forward as you look, once you handle your short-term challenges, to be prepared for sustainability long-term. So consider a redesign if your volumes have changed dramatically. The next important area is your visibility. Do you have black holes in your supply chain today that cause you to lose sight of where your material is? Now more than ever, as demands have changed, as shortages may exist, you need to shore up those black holes that you can make decisions. So improving visibility would be the time to look at that. If you haven't digitized your supply chain, it's something that you might want to consider so that you create a single version of truth, a single source of information, so that you can make decisions on the fly. These are things that you're going to need in this new supply chain coming out of COVID during the restart. And the last area that I would highlight is PPE is here to stay, as I mentioned earlier. It is now is going to be part of your plan. You want to consider, not only do I need my parts moving, but I need to make sure at all times that I have the proper PPE equipment available for my employees, that I'm able to sanitize more frequently and have the material to do that, and that I can keep the plants running. So I'm going to pass it over now to Matt Eckler to continue the discussion around restart.
All right, so step 6 is to define a clear decision-making team. And the question we want to start out with is your team ready to respond, and are they ready to be resilient? Let's start with the definition of resilience, and that is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. So considering everything that's going on, we know there's going to be difficulties. And the question becomes, how do we give our teams the ability to respond quickly? So if you look at the industry and you look at what's happening to companies, many companies are being forced to lay off, to furlough, to cut wages, to significant portions of the workforce. And with that comes employees taking on new responsibilities, new roles. And most likely that's in addition to their current roles. And this is what we see as the major risk to this resiliency. You know, the risk lies in the conflicting priorities and the lack of time to quickly respond to what we know are going to be challenges and difficulties. So as leaders, we must take this head on and mitigate the risk. And what we want to talk about in this section to do that is we're going to focus on communication. And as simple as that may be, it's not easy. And the first thing around communication that we recommend is meeting cadence. So shift startup meetings, huddles, stand-ups, whatever you call them in your organization, we recommend you increase the frequency to at least daily, if not 2 to 3 times per day, especially as we approach the startup date. You know, we've done this across our organization over the past 5 weeks, and it's helped us not only transfer seamlessly from in-office operations to working at home remote operations, but it's allowed us to quickly get out ahead of issues and stop them from festering and stopping from more significant consequences. When you look at the agenda of the meeting, really depends on what's the context of the meeting you're trying to accomplish. Who's the team? For us, we try to keep it simple. We use the Scrum framework, which is what happened yesterday or since we last met, what is happening today or until we meet again, and what are the roadblocks or issues that we're facing as a team. So as you get those proper communication channels up and running and you increase the frequency, now we look at 2 areas that we recommend you focus on. And that first one is upstream decision making. So our challenge here is how do we make sure that those planners and frontline employees at the plant, when they're having those communications, how do we make sure they know what's really important? And you need to build off your continuity plan and make sure the expectations are clear on what are the decisions they need to make and what is the information that they need to pass back up the chain so that those decisions can be made at a higher level. That could be things like what are the inventory levels, what are the delays, what providers are more at risk. Those are things that need to be shared with your team so that when their issues come to light, they have clear focus on what's priority and they make those decisions quickly. The second part is the downstream focus. And by this, we're looking at logistics planning, routing, and tracking functions. You know, your team is probably accustomed to some safety cushions that were there in the past and no longer exist. That could be safety stock, it could be padded transit times, it could be available capacity and the ability to usually go to the spot market and get it. Don't underestimate the potential ripple effect of those downstream issues as we restart. There's going to be less cushion, there's going to be less capacity. You're going to have parts that don't have the safety stock that they once did. And so make sure your logistics teams are aware of that and that impact that they could have further down. The next step is number 7, identify and secure logistics capacity. The question we focus on here is, are you approaching this restart as an opportunity or a problem? And we say that because right now, everybody is surrounded by a lot of negative news. We are all on the defensive. And this specifically, we think is a great opportunity to go on the offensive and change your mindset around your logistics capacity and get proactive. Now more than ever, your providers are going to be willing to work with you. They're going to be willing to collaborate with you, to build on the relationship that you already have. And that includes both current and new providers. What we're seeing is a lot of hesitancy from our customers and their suppliers to work with new providers, and rightfully so. And we just talked about the shortening of staff, the changing of responsibilities. When you have that type of environment, most people are going to go back to who are my partners that I can really trust. And so with that in mind, what we recommend is that you look at each one of those existing relationships and you really make sure you understand the capabilities of each provider so that you can take your current core group of providers and further build out your routing guides. The goal that you should be aiming for is depth and reliability in each one of your routing guides. So you have primary, secondary, and tertiary groups of coverage, which again is going to add to the resiliency so that your team can move quickly when things go sideways. Other things we recommend right now is executing network RFQs or mini bids on areas that maybe you believe could be more competitive. Look at identifying securing capacity for the future, for the coming months, and maybe even pre-book that capacity to mitigate some volatility in costs. We saw some initial volatility when we first went into shutdown as the demand for essential goods and for the PPE and for certain industries like healthcare and consumer staples, those big spikes in demand caused rates to go up short term. And then they've been settling back down lower over the last few weeks. That volatility is going to continue. We expect that to continue not only for the automotive restart, but as well as other currently non-essential industries come back online. The last point here is to choose the right partners. And there's really two parts of this. The first one is financial stability. We want to make sure that you're choosing asset carriers and logistics providers that are financially strong and are going to be here for the long run. In our experience, usually this is a best practice that we see at the larger tier 1 and OEMs, but there's no reason that companies of any size can't put in some type of process to make sure they're vetting their providers, that they're staying up to date, and that they're aware of the difficulties that we all face in this industry, and that they're in a strong position and that they're going to be there for the long term. And the second part is that you want to analyze and weigh the trade-offs between your asset carriers and your logistic providers. There's some value-add activity that you can get right now, especially like we said, when you're short-staffed and when you need to have a good pulse on your suppliers. There's value-add activity that a provider should be able to give you in managing that supplier compliance. And the way that plays out, and what we do every single day is making sure that when we take an order, that we validate at the supplier level, what is the ready time, what is the physical count of the material, and any discrepancies off plan, we're able to quickly push that to our customer, and they can then make the decision that they need to make. So you should be able to expect that from someone. And that someone should be able to act as an extension of your supply chain, of your team, and not only act in the short term and in the now, but also take that and then give you feedback on how you can improve in the future. Step 8, the next thing we want to look at is understanding the international challenges. And the question here is, are you prepared for your international lead times to double? Whether you're importing from China, Asia, or from Mexico, there's a lot of realities happening right now that are going to potentially affect those lead times. Our ports are overflowing. We have non-essential cargo that has stopped moving. If you've been seeing, many of the ports are completely out of space and they're going into extra yards and piling containers up. So not only do you have the non-essential cargo that's stopped moving, but you also have a spike in the essential cargo demand. So you have those orders have been increased, future orders have been pulled ahead. And what that's setting up is a massive shortage in logistics capacity. So as things start to come back online, you're going to see trucks, vessels, aircraft, all really strained from a capacity standpoint as they try to handle all this pent-up demand. A good example of that we're seeing right now is in FEMA taking over hundreds of aircrafts from China. And this week we're seeing the air freight rates going up 5-6 times what they were just 4 or 5 weeks ago. The last point here is a coordinated response. So working with suppliers in different countries already has its existing difficulties with time zones and language barriers. But not only is it important to coordinate the response now, but there's also an opportunity to gain insight to how those countries are handling their response. Each country is at a different stage of their response to the virus, and each country has their own legislative actions that they're taking to counter it. So stay educated, stay in contact with those suppliers to make sure that you're coordinating a response that's best for both parties. We're going to be producing another webinar this Thursday, specifically on the challenges in Mexico. We're very excited to be welcoming a guest who's an expert on that topic. His name is Manuel Montoya, and he's the managing director of the automotive cluster in Nuevo Leon, Mexico. So please join us Thursday for that webinar. The next step to our restart plan is, what is the plan for long-term recovery? And the question here is, are you prepared to convert your lessons learned to long-term supply chain strategies? So as you think about that, the first point that we're looking at, and you can see the graphic that we have from BCG, the Boston Consulting Group, there's a lot of people, a lot of experts that are out here trying to predict and give consensus on where we might be going and what trajectory our recovery is going to take. At the end of the day, they don't know, I don't know, we don't know what lies ahead. What we should do, though, is we need to prepare for the worst case scenario. We have to go in our mindset and be prepared for that, and we have to plan for that. Okay, and so what that means is we need to build resiliency for the future. If you can't accomplish that resiliency right now, you can't put into place the things that we're recommending. At least commit to getting it fixed in the long term. So take action on those lessons learned. A good example is the digitalization of the supply chain and supply chain mapping. That can be a very time-consuming, resource-heavy task. And what we're seeing is that the companies who went through that before this are in a very good position right now. They know where all the goods are located at their own four walls, at their supplier levels. They have the transportation mapped, and they have real-time access to where their cargo's at, and allows them to make the decisions quickly that they need to. But today, it's not just location data. I think that the location data is really something that you should expect. That's a norm. And really where you need to be looking and what you should be trying to do is take that data, and you should be looking at, is my material going to be where it needs to be when I need it? And so that's taking that location data and then doing the analysis so that you actually have what you really need to make decisions. So if the companies that did it before are set up good now, and if you haven't done it before, then make a commitment to doing it in the future, or at least trying to start somewhere at some part within your supply chain, maybe the ones that are at most risk right now. The last step, step 10, is we're going to try to bring this together and really close with the fact that, we're all in this together as an industry. And, we asked, would you agree that we face challenges now that we've never faced in the past? And a good example, or the way that we look at this, is that restart initiatives in the past have been isolated, smaller subsets, whether it be the financial crisis and the bankruptcies that followed, multiple labor disputes, natural disasters, etc. Never have we had such a global issue where everything's interconnected and we're trying to restart at the same time. So it's important that we lead now, that we take action by leading, by taking the steps to mitigate the risk of that weak link in the supply chain. What that means, it means ask the tough questions. That means expecting what you expect. That means over communicating, okay? Doing all the things that you know you need to do and making sure that your team is aware of what they need to do. And I think that if we take a higher purpose, if we really look at this as to how important this is to our economy and to all of our livelihoods, I think that we can rally our teams. I think you're going to see a very motivated workforce that's galvanized towards that higher purpose. You know, working together as OEM suppliers, raw material providers, the logistics providers, the warehousemen, everybody together working towards a successful restart. That's what we need to do. Our economy depends on us. So that concludes the webinar. I think we have some time for Q&A. So I will pass it back over to Paul, and we will try to answer some questions with the time remaining.
So the first question is, what are some of the tactics I can take to improve my communication to providers in the demand difference between my actual and forecasted demand? We talked about this earlier. So one of the best actions you can take would be to, as close to the actual shipment conveyance day that you can get, would be to adjust. So typically a release is known a week out, several days out, but really the what I would say is the most telling moment is going to be when the day that the supplier is ready to ship, because things can happen between the actual release being shipped and the actual material available on that ship date. So the more that information is available before it moves into conveyance mode onto a truckload, et cetera, the more resilient we can be and the more responsive we can be to adjust. So really, to me, that would be the best tactic, would be to be on top of the actual shipment of the day that material is going to move. The next question that came up are, what are some of the ways that I can improve my provider visibility? So again, as we get into the restart and the volatility that we're expecting to see, there's going to be what the industry is predicting are significant shortage potentials. So visibility is going to be critical at every touch point, as I mentioned earlier, as part of the 10 steps to restart. But some of the tactics you can deploy are, number one, is to ensure that the visibility, that what has been picked up is confirmed and made available to our suppliers, our tier ones, the day that the material is picked up, so that any shortages or any overages or any adjustments at that shipment if they were made versus the release, that everybody is aware, and we can respond to that. The next real important portion of visibility is as we move downstream, we're going to get into challenges. We don't want to forget about challenges from once material is moving on equipment, the potential delays. It's now more important than ever as plants are preparing for the material they're going to receive to ensure that those time milestones are up to date. ETAs are always up to date, so that when the plants know, the planners know exactly when that material is going to arrive. The third question that was asked is, what's the most critical thing that I can do right now to prepare for this restart? Well, obviously safety first, stay healthy first, especially in the automotive industry. That goes without saying. But really, the most critical thing you can do is to look in the mirror and really assess what your capability of your supply chain is today. The further upstream you're able to go with your supply chain, the more resilient you're going to be. The more resilient and the more you're going to be able to flex and adapt. And what I mean by further upstream is the closer I can get to confirming exactly what that supplier is going to ship, the better I'm going to be able to respond. And that is the day before, the 2 days before, whatever that release pattern is, the closer I can get to firming that exact amount, because again, there's going to be shortages. Suppliers may predict that they can protect your release schedule, and at the last minute, there may be a quality issue. So the closer I get to that, the farther upstream I go, the more I'm going to be able to react. But we understand not all suppliers have had that ability to move upstream. Prior to COVID, you may have had that in your strategy path, but your true capability to manage at that upstream level was not there. So you have to be realistic of what your capability is coming out of the gate. And if you can't go upstream, then at least get to the point further downstream that you do have your capability. And if it's at the day of conveyance, and one of the things that you can easily administer immediately is a supplier compliance plan if you don't have it today. And it doesn't have to be automated. If you have a good logistics partner you're working with, I would highly recommend that you focus on validation at the day of pickup. What was shipped, and if there are any adjustments over or short or above that occurred at that shipment time, so that you can adjust accordingly. So those are 3 questions that have been asked. Another question that has just come in is do you see any issues with truck drivers not allowed in buildings when delivering? Certainly that is all over the news right now. The capability, the carriers, the capabilities and their responsibilities, the requirements of all the tier 1s that have come out from a safety perspective, that is a critical piece that you should expect from. It starts with your providers, your logistics providers, that they have properly conveyed the requirements of every location when carriers are put on pickups. The more the carrier understands that requirement prior to getting into an automotive facility, the better the chance that driver will be able to properly access the location and have the material offloaded without significant delay. So absolutely, I believe there's going to be challenges. You have lots of tier 1s and tier 2s. There's lots of companies in the chain, as I explained earlier, and those smaller companies or those that are not conveying those requirements, there's going to be challenges. And a good logistics provider can be proactive to ensure that those delivery requirements are met, are understood prior to a driver ever getting near the plant to make the delivery. The final question, and then I will turn it back over to Matt, is how long do you project that there will be a capacity crunch, a truckload capacity crunch, or a carrier capacity crunch? So we all expect there's truly going to be pent-up demand right out of the gate, as everybody is looking at the information that's coming out from the OEMs. Conversely, from tier 1s that are sharing their information. And as Matt explained with the U-curve and the expectations of this first few months, it is one of pent-up demand. But you've got to consider also the carrier side of the business and the potential right now with the shutdowns, potential bankruptcies. Certainly there is stimulus in place that is being considered, but those are areas that you're truly going to have to consider when you look at carrier capacity and the potential of a capacity crunch going into the market. I would suggest that confidence is going to be critical. And it goes back to the restart and how effective and successful this industry restart is. If we have a good, strong restart with good communication, and the confidence level is there coming out of the gate, that's certainly going to have a great impact on the carrier side for supporting this market again. On the other side, if there's a potential of any kind of false restart or challenges as we get out of the gate here, that confidence level is going to be challenged, and that would have an impact. Confidence also not only affects the tier one, the OEM, the consumer, the buyer of automotive, but it also affects the carrier side of this equation. So confidence is key here, and it's really the reason that we're putting on a webinar like this, to ensure that we're doing everything we can to make sure that information is available. So those are the questions that have been asked. If there are any others that come in, or if you have any other questions, please feel free to send those and we can respond to those. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Matt Eckler to close out the webinar.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for participating in today's webinar. I know there is a lot of good information. I know that these steps will definitely help you and your company prepare for restart. But we close for a higher purpose. And I really, truly believe that purpose is critical right now. At ALS, our purpose is to deliver an epic experience. And if there's one thing that we want to accomplish with today's experience, it's really to inspire you to act, to show urgency in getting prepared. We owe it to ourselves, to our families, and to our country's economies to get this thing started right away. Our supply chain is the key to our nation's recovery. So let's act fast and deliver everyone an epic restart. Thank you.